Thank you so much, Jan. So let me put the first key. So I start, okay, great, we are good to go. So before I talk about really a scopus, I start talking about a trend that I see in the industry. And one of those areas I talk about is the publishing. And this is from perspective of Elsevier. These are the trends of how much we publish as Elsevier year to year. And you can see from the last decade or 15 years, there's an increase in the growth from year to year on how much we put and publish in each year. Last year, Elsevier published about close to 500,000 articles, which is really a 60% increase from a decade ago. And this is found out to be about like 1,000 articles each day from Elsevier get published. And this again, this is just Elsevier. What's really interesting here is to see how much is being submitted versus what's being published. So you can see that orange line over 1.5 million documents being submitted every year. Only about 29% is being published out of those document, and the rest of them are rejected for many reasons, and mostly actually, especially from Elsevier point of view. And I also speak from really generically from other publishers. Any high quality publisher will have the same kind of trend. So the reason for rejection is mostly the quality. So, and a publisher that cares about the reputation of their journals and what they offer to their users and readers, they always look for quality quality material. And why they are rejected? Because it's just the material that gets submitted is not a quality material worth being published. So you see on the table on the left side is the growth of submission, which increased about 8.2%, and what's being published about 4% has not kept with that submission. Not to mention now in the middle, you see the rejection. So the rejection is getting, rate is higher every year. And that's really scary. And if you think about it from why publishers reject articles, it's just because they are not quality material. And the you can see I'm an old person. It's not from last 10 years in the college. But I mean, I've been in college in the early days when I was studying, we used to have the term of garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you get into, like, the computer code, you get out. It's really the same concept I applied here. If you read the garbage material, you're going to generate garbage output or articles. And that's really where the heart of this, why data articles being rejected. From that concept, I always talk about when you start your research and you learn those skills, you got to have a good skills from the beginning, so you can have a good output when you publish or you conduct your research. So don't start your research in scientific and unfounded. And then usually people pick on a Google, which is really a legitimate Google or any other search engine that is not peer-reviewed. Has peer-reviewed sources. It's a great tool to go after those scientific and peer-reviewed platforms that provide you with the quality material and sources. So we certainly understand today there's so many data available, so much information for our researchers, and it's very challenging for our researchers to pick and choose the good information, the quality information, and to stay up to date. There's so much wealth of information available in scientific literature today. So, and then decipher which one is reliable, which is not reliable is just not an easy task. So I have few things really for you as an early researcher or postdoc, and you're going to carry those skills and move on. Train yourself and get the skills that help you get into the routine of looking at the data from reliable sources. Some of those reliable sources, like they call them discovery services, like Scopus, Web of Science, and any other services that you trust and your institution trusts, rather than going after simple as Google, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying do not use Google or Google Scholar. There are some wealth information out there, but your initial and your starting point should be from something more reliable. Why? Because discovery services usually designed to support that kind of quality and scholarly literatures. Many of those discovery services have peer-reviewed literatures, and they tell you what are these sources. So it's not like you are searching some kind of sources that unknown or just a flyby that just showed up. Believe it or not, there's over 10,000 fraudulent journals today that even some people do not know these are predatory journals. With those platforms, like again, the search and discovery services like Scopus or any other services with that, and this is why we are here today, they are consistent in their research. They are not designed to cater to one versus another. There's no ads. They always tell you, you search today, you search tomorrow, you almost get the same result, if not more, based on the indexing. So your same query can bring you back the same result time after time. And usually the results are explained how they reached to that result. And I use this statement here, which is our mission, and I don't have to tell you really a whole lot about the mission of us in the research area, is that today our society is facing a lot of difficulties and challenges on having a trusted science and trusted facts, and it's our obligation to pass on the knowledge and the information, and also the skills to do scientific thinking and literacy among the people we interact with, people we teach, and the people we work with in general. And hence why we are talking about Scopus today. So definitely, from what we discussed earlier, and what's been why we focus on a valid and peer-reviewed literature is we want to go after those platforms that are notorious, and they are trusted, and they are used by a lot of institutions for quality decision, quality research. And I do have something, actually, it's something really interesting especially for those postdocs. So hang on with me just a couple more slides. So we're talking about Scopus. What is a Scopus? Scopus is a source neutral abstract and citation database. So there's no full text in the Scopus. You're only searching abstract, and all the sources in the Scopus are peer reviewed. So you're not going to see anything not peer reviewed in the sources. Data in the Scopus or the database content is not from Elsevier, contrary to a lot of people think it's only Elsevier content. Actually, it's not. The data comes from more than 5,000 publishers. And it's Elsevier content only actually constitute 10% of the database. There are over 24,000 serial titles in the Scopus and over 230,000 books. All of that generate you will see the model we'll talk about in a second, that there's actually we passed the 80 million articles in the Scopus that generate over 70,000 affiliation profiles and over 60 million author profiles, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So Scopus, beside that data that it has, also generate or provide you with analytical tools. So you can see things from high at like a bird's eye view. And it's very powerful to let you see things and see trends, get insights, rather than just sit down and read. But it doesn't provide you the readership, but those tools will help you make decisions quickly, just to get an overview. More on the sources, there are over 42 terabytes of data in the Scopus, which I'm going to come back to that at the end for those who are moving on to something more professional research. There are over 1.7 billion citations. So all the data comes into Scopus. Not only the content comes in an index, but also citations comes with that. And again, we generate all those profiles out of it. Scopus data can go back to 1788, but the citations and references go back to 1970 for the fact that nobody tracked citation and references before that time, and the information is not really complete or accurate before that 1970. So what contents exactly you're looking at in the Scopus? So Scopus is a global, and I have something really interesting for you, an eye-opener in the next slide. So I did mention that the Scopus data or content comes from over 5,000 publishers, which are spread out all over the world. This content comes from over 105 different countries that obviously now they do the original articles written in different languages, that cover over 40 different languages. But the abstract in the Scopus, and that's one of the conditions that if a title is going to be on a scope in a Scopus database, that means each published work has to have an English abstract, and that's actually what you are searching. So even if it's looking at the article, the original article written in different language, the abstract always in English. So Scopus, you may research Scopus today and get some, certain number of results. If you run it tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier, you will get maybe higher results most of the time. And because we bring over 10,000 articles every day. And with that comes also the citation. So you may see some number of citations or references on certain articles today, tomorrow, the number may increase. So it's very dynamic. There's over, even if you are, let's say outside, you don't have access to certain full text. Scopus, let me back up. Scopus does have a link. So when you find an article, it does link you to the full text if it's available. So if it's an open access, you definitely have access to that, where it's, that article is stored. But if it's something, a subscription through Western Michigan, you can get access to that. And also, if it's not available to you full text through Western Michigan, Scopus will suggest also an alternative where you can find it. So there's over 10 million articles on Scopus that are open access. They come from over, I think over 6,000 journals now. The document type that you see on Scopus is not just article from journals. You can see conference papers, you can see books and book series. Conference papers are huge. And here we go, actually, you can see the full broad spectrum of the document type and how much of each. And you can see that you look at them for horizontally and vertically. It's just like in a breadth and depth of everything available out there. So you're not searching and missing certain type of document when you search, and also you're not searching missing on any subject area. So wherever your subject is, you're going to find a wealth of contents on the Scopus. I'm not going to go through this each individually, and this is something available for you to look at. But what's really interesting and more important is to know is something about Scopus content. And I mentioned earlier where the data comes from in Scopus content. So this is the interesting slide. You can see the red is well, let me back up a little bit. We've seen research output from the Western Hemisphere, most of the, in the past, all the research and the articles or published work comes from the Western Hemisphere in the early days, more than 10, 15 years ago. Let's look at the red bar, how it's increasing continuously. And that's because if we are seeing an increase in higher rate from the Eastern Hemisphere. So that means, like, you're seeing content now on a global level. And then I did mention in the contents on Scopus that the data is come from 105 different countries. So as you see, as a matter of fact, if you look at the 2020, that rate or the gap between the yellow and the red bar is just shrinking compared to what you see in 2019. And that is just because of the amount of the data coming out of the Eastern Hemisphere. Why this is important to you? Because there's so much research and so much output coming out of the East, or even globally, let's put it this way. And any database or any kind of search engine that does not provide you a global content, it's not really giving you the whole pictures. And that's where Scopus comes in. Scopus data is global, as we talked about earlier, and that's how we cover not just the Western Hemisphere data, but also we cover on what's being published from the Eastern Hemisphere. And you can see it in these numbers. I mean, this number is comparing, obviously, Scopus to Web of Science, and why it's the global coverage on Scopus is just more important than just catering to certain to the Western Hemisphere or local published work. So I'd be remiss not to talk about the Scopus data model. So in order to understand really what Scopus data model is, I mean, the result of Scopus and also the analytical tool, you got to understand the data model. Scopus data model rely on a triangular relationship between three things, which is the article, the author, and the institution. So the content of a Scopus tells you there's an article written by an author, and that author is affiliated by an institution. This model is always tell you who is doing what and where they are doing it, and in what capacity. So it just, you know, that model just works in many ways, and you can see it in analytical tool in many ways. But really the focal point here is the author. And this takes me back to what I talked about at the beginning, is our author, our researchers are the most important things in the research, because going back to that concept, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have the right skills, you don't have the right information in the beginning, you are not going to have a quality output at the end. So why I concentrate on the authors? Because they are the focal point of the article itself and the institution. So this is the data model. Anytime you are in a Scopus on any result, if you are looking at the document, let's say you started by the subject area, you can look at the topic, but also you can see who is doing that work, which are the authors. If you start with the author, you can see what the author has been doing, he or she, and who they are affiliated with as an institution, so where they are doing that research. If you are at the institution data and looking at the institution profile, we can tell you, or Scopus can tell you anytime, how much work they have been doing and in what area, like in what subject area, and who are their author who are working with this. So you can see this relationship, triangular relationship, constantly prevalent in the Scopus results anytime. So you can jump from one to the other at any time. You have one, you have the other two at most of the time. So this is where I, again, concentrate on the author or the researchers. And I can talk about this concept in two ways. And authors always have to have these two areas, the evaluation and the showcase. You can always showcase what you've been doing. In order for you to showcase what you've been doing, you have to evaluate. So you are either your evaluator or somebody evaluating you. With that, and you can see this relationship, why it's always important, and the researcher is the focal point. A researcher has a relationship with three different entities all the time. Why? Because to survive and to work, they have to have that relationship. They can have a relationship with an institution to get hired, so they can get the resources, or they are increase their, improve their career, what they are working with, while they are working with that institution. And also, they can, the institution has to evaluate the author or the researcher. So for many reasons, to be hired, to be provided more resources, to continue on with the research, to provide funding. My relationship as an author or researcher also going to be with other people, so other researchers. Why? Because I wanted to look at people, let people see my work and showcase. So I want to show them my work so they can see and read my work. I get cited and increase my impact. Maybe they would like to collaborate with me as a researcher. On the other flip side, when other people want to evaluate me, it's the same kind of symbiotic relationship. People looking for other researchers to collaborate with. They are going to read my articles. They are also maybe want to do a review on my work. Oops. So the same relationship goes with funders. So funders can either, you are applying for a fund, they want to showcase your work, or the funder is going to evaluate your work so they can approve your funding. So this kind of relationship really focuses only on the author. So the author or researcher is the most important part in any kind of research. So going back to our talk in the Scopus, so I'm going to go through those three areas and how you can search them and how you can jump from one to the other. The first of all is the search and discovery in Scopus. Why you want to do a search and discovery in Scopus is just for many reasons. There's different reasons why you conduct your research on a Scopus. You start with a discovery to see what impact. And before I get into that, I'll be neglecting something to show you how you can access Scopus. Scopus is for Western Michigan is by IP, so you don't really have to have an ID and password to access Scopus. All you have to do is type scopus.com and you are in. However, I always recommend that you create an ID. So you need to do that while you are at Western Michigan on campus. The first time you click on create an account, and then you can just use an ID and password. And subsequently, you can click on a sign in, and you'll be able to access Scopus from in or outside campus. The ID and password will allow you to have a profile, allow you to have saved searches, history, alerts, and so forth. I mean, that's just like any other service. There's really nothing fancy on that. Let's see. So this is what I wanted to get into the point of doing a search and discovery. You can use Scopus for anything to see what's being researched, what's being done out there, what kind of output, if you want to differentiate your work from other people. So you want to see what's being researched on that topic, and you want to do something different from that. And you want to track the impact of research, who is doing what and where, and what kind of impact this has been going on. Maybe you want to differentiate your work because this topic has less impact. Maybe you want to do something a little bit different. Maybe you are tracking or doing research on a disease, what kind of impact it has on certain societies, geographical area, or even on a global level, if you will. You want to find relevant information to something you are studying. You want to, this is a great tool for that. You want to stay current on the field that are of interest to you, and maybe you want to become a reviewer or an editor. You want to, again, all the data that you're looking for is a matter of on a broad level to see what's happening today and what's being published, so you'll be up to date on that information. The basic search, Scopus does have like both advanced and a basic search. So as simple as that, you can search with the basic search. You can search the article title, abstract, and keyword. That's by default, but you can change that if you click on the drop-down option here. You can have different fields. You can search if you would like, if you're looking for something specific. But anytime, when you are on Scopus, you run a basic search, Scopus can come by default search those three fields, the abstract, the title, and the keyword. And it will highlight, as you see in yellow here in the document, where it found your keyword or the word or the terms that you put in there. And as you see, Scopus is just like any platform. You can, really easy to search. There's nothing complicated about it. And there's only 4 tabs: the document, the author, and the affiliation. Again, those are the 3 that I talked about at the beginning, which are the data model of Scopus. And also you have an advanced tab. If you are interested of doing more advanced search that you can stack a lot of terms, you can use the advanced tab to search by field individually or stack your terms. Once you have your results, you can narrow down your results and focus it based on the facet on the left side. So whatever you're looking, something in the like certain years or by authors, by subject area, and so forth, you can really filter your data to narrow down your search. I always suggest start with little, as much as little, with the terms, not to expand your search on any of those filters. Just keep your search broad. The terms, they say with less you get more, so that's where it apply here. I would start saying use terms without narrowing down your search, and then narrow down your result with the facet so you don't miss anything. Once you have your search result and you narrow down your search to the final set, you can start reading. You can also look at the abstract in each document or all collectively by view abstract. You can see here, we'll show all abstract. You can see them all on the screen. or you can see the bird's eye view of the articles or the result by using the analyze search result. And that's where things start getting, more fun for you to look at the data from graphical or visualizing the data rather than just read each article. So that's really take the facets and put them in visualization for you, and you can see how many articles published in each year. So it could be based on a year, it could be based on the sources, the authors, the affiliation, territory, and so forth. So there's so many facets available for you. You can visualize this individually. And you can, by the way, these widgets you can click on them individually and become larger. Each document on Scopus would have also metrics. So you can see the metrics, the number of citation on Scopus, the field-weighted citation impact, and the PlumX metrics. So if you could give me a second, please. I'm sorry, running out of breath. The field-weighted citation is very interesting here. We provide, you don't see that actually in any other databases, and this is really relevant in Scopus. And those metrics are not proprietary to Elsevier. These are what we call snowball metrics, and those are agreed on by a consortium of academics. And the formula, if you go to snowballmetrics.com, you will see those metrics, and you can calculate them yourself, so you can see the formula. So the fieldwork citation impact is really, it tells you where this article stands in comparison to other articles in that field. An article published in medical journals may not be really a medical article. It could be, let's say, biomedical engineering. So it may qualify for an engineering article. So you don't want to compare articles in that journals to other articles in the same journals, because they do have different kind of weight. An article in math may have different kind of citations versus an article in medicine. So field-weighted citation comes to play a role here to tell you that this article compared to other articles in the same field, where it stands. So this article is above, anything above one is normally is the equal. If it's anything above one, means better than the average citation of other articles in the same field. So that's why field-weighted citation tell you this article is very valuable. It has a higher impact than an average article. And we also, in the metric, we show you the PlumX metrics, how many citations the article has received beyond the Scopus or even the scientific area more. If you hear the alt metrics, that's what PlumX metrics. And as a matter of fact, I think I have one more slide to explain this. Also, it tells you which, if you look on the bottom square, that the number of documents that cited this article. So there are 228 documents that cited this article in the past, and you can view them. Even Scopus will provide you with those documents, tell you which document cited this document. So actually here's the PlumX. If you click on the view all metrics, all the metrics that compress will expand and start give you all this information on a broader level, including the PlumX metrics. I think I have one more slide. PlumX metrics are included, which the metrics comes from, or the citation comes from different kind of platform outside the databases. Think about the usage, mentions, bookmarks, social media, regular media like radio, newspapers, blogs, scientific blogs, and so forth. It's kind of really even tweets and Facebook. So mostly from scientific sources, actually, even if they are social media, but more are deemed as a scientific, not an average person, Facebook, for example. But it can really give you more metrics on the article outside the regular citation in other articles. So we talked about the document itself, how you go after the document, you search them, but now the second leg of the triangle, which is the authors. Again, we talked about the authors are being the pillar of everything in the research. So the author profile is one of the valuable features in Scopus that provide, is used. Let me put those actually, so I don't have to worry about them. So the author profile is a really good start point for many reasons, either to come to it or to start from it at the beginning. So you can decide if, from author profile, you're looking for people to collaborate with, to partner with on a research. It's a great tool to see who is an expert in that field. Obviously, people who publish more, get citation more, they are an expert in that field. So those are people you can partner with. You can track a career by looking at the H-index, which is really tell you how many citations you've had compared to the number of articles. Maybe you want to showcase your work that we talked about earlier, why you as a researcher has a relationship with other. You want to showcase your work to an institution, to funders and other people, so they can see you and evaluate you, and also maybe partner with you. Maybe we're looking for experts in certain fields. You want to hire them on a panel or work with you on certain projects. The author profile is a great tool for that. Maybe you want to hire somebody, bring people to join your team. Author profiles is just an awesome way to get started with the Scopus. So the second tab on the Scopus is the author. So you can look for authors by names. That's one way to go after them, or you can look them by, if you have the full name. If not, you can just browse through them, if you will, if you have any information about, last name maybe, or if you don't have the full information on ORCID ID, or even an institution where they have been affiliated with. And I put the numbers 1, 2, 3 on the top. That is something that I'm really proud of to use with the Scopus. I always publicize this. There's no other service out there that you can get to an author profile with 3 clicks. No more. 3 clicks and you can have an author profile. So when you type in the author name, immediately you're going to get a list of the names that's similar. If it's a unique name, you're going to get that name immediately, or that profile immediately. So that's what I always say, that you cannot get that anywhere else. 3 clicks and you are on author profiles. An author profile in Scopus, which actually this is a new format of the author profile. We have added more features into it. If you've seen it before that look different, that's why. This is just released last week, as a matter of fact. So with the author profile, we provide you with the name and which institution they're affiliated with. If they were affiliated with other institutions in the past, you can also see it here. So if this person has been affiliated with other institutions, you can see where he or she has been working and publishing in the past. Oops, my apology. This is supposed to come up. So on the left side, you will see the metrics for that author, including the how many documents this author published, how many citations, and their H-index. You can see throughout their career in the middle where how many documents they publish and how many citations, all the graphics. And on the bottom, you will see those documents. Lewis has published over 674 documents, and you can see those documents on the bottom. If you click on that tab, you will see those actual documents. And you can see the documents that cited Lewis documents. So you can see those cited by 4,960. Just by his index is really high. And you can see who his co-authors and what topic he's been publishing in. You can take this information, as a matter of fact, and also analyze it. So you can see the same tools in a similar way for the author. You can see where this author has been publishing, what type of document he's been publishing, and what subject area. Tracking an author. So those tools that I just mentioned, showed you, actually, they do come back with all the widgets. So these widgets really give you the bird's eye view for his performance or her performance throughout the years, and then throughout their career, as a matter of fact. Let me jump into the affiliation profile. We're doing good on time. Yeah, it's almost good. Done. Any questions, Juliana?
Yes, we did have a question in the chat about how to identify a fraudulent journal from a reliable one.
Oh my goodness. Let me pause, defer that to the end. This is totally outside here, but actually I do have, when I get to the point on the journals, I do have something to show you, but I have one more piece outside here, and I will
Thank you.
Get you to that. Hopefully we have enough time to go through it. It's a great tool, as a matter of fact. So let me talk about the affiliation profile. Affiliation profile is just similar to the author profile, where we collect information about the institution. So again, the author is affiliated with an institution. put this information together. So the institution you can track an institution, see what the institution has been performing. Let's talk about Western Michigan. You can see what Western Michigan has been performing in one subject area, where it's been redoing research, who the authors, how many documents are being published out of Western Michigan. Going back to the concept of showcasing and evaluating, an institution wants to show what they've been doing. So why? To attract talent to come and work and study at the institution, conduct research, but also to attract funds. So if other institutions or funders do not know what you've been working on, they are not going to trust they give you the funds. So this is why the affiliation profile is really important in here, as much as the author profile. And you want to evaluate the team based on performance. So let's say, as a matter of fact, you will see in the Scopus, not just a high level of institution, but also based on what's being submitted, each document may be associated or connected with certain division under that higher institution. So let's say, for example, there are certain articles out of Western Michigan affiliated with the School of Medicine or different kind of departments. So that's how we compare how the institution is performing on that lower level. What's the affiliation profile look like? You can see kind of think of it like a resume or a CV. You can see the institution name, what kind of variety of name, maybe, as a matter of fact, this may not be prevalent in the academic, but in the other institutions, like especially government institutions, their names change a lot. Even corporate, as a matter of fact, they change name throughout the year. So if you're tracking information by the institution, if they have used different name in the past, you may not pick it up, but that's why the profile comes in really handy. It detects this information and collects the information for you and source it all together in one profile. And I give you that change in the name of the institution, so you don't miss any articles. So you also, again, you see the document affiliated for the whole institution, but also only for that institution. So if there's any other division affiliated with that institution, we segregate them. You can see the difference between the number, because we do have different divisions under Western Michigan that have different published work under different name. And also you can see the authors. These documents published by over 4,000 authors. If you click, those numbers are clickable, by the way. You can click on the 4,000 and you can go after those authors to see who they are, who are publishing. On the bottom, you see the document by subject area where Western Michigan has been publishing in what subject area, and who is being collaborating with Western Michigan here. If you click on a tab, you can see that, and where Western Michigan has been publishing. So you can see the sources, what titles. So that's one thing. Actually, this is a good hint on the subject of how to detect, find a journal to publish in. If you trust the institution decision to publish in certain sources, you can go after those. This is one avenue, not the avenue, one avenue to find. If other people, if your institution is trusting those journals, you should probably trust them too, and then publish in those journals. And also you see on the right side the pie chart in the subject area where the percentage-wise where the institution has been publishing. So you can see, again, the same analytical tool is available for you in the affiliation. You can go drill into those one at a time. And this is lead me to the last portion, which is really a journal analyzer. So going back to that concept of finding predatory. So journal analyzer is really not just for one thing. You can compare journals to each other, whether you want to find insight on reading where you want to read, whether you want to identify a journal that you want to publish in. So this is also one way to find fraudulent. So these kind of platform, including Scopus, like I said, it's the sources on Scopus is only peer reviewed. So you really, somebody else, which is really a board, as a matter of fact, the content behind the Scopus is evaluated by individual or independent board called Content Selection and Advisory Board. They are experts in the field. They are not affiliated with Elsevier. They just evaluate titles and they deem them as peer reviewed, and they put clear them to be available on Scopus. And they constantly evaluate it, actually every 2 years. So if this board already evaluated those titles for you, so anything you analyze on a Scopus and the sources, you know it's peer reviewed. You don't have to worry about that. So this is one of really great sources to find the journals to publish in. So it's not a fraud. You know for sure it's not a fraudulent title. But that's not what I was talking about. There's still something else I would like to refer you to later, Shiva. And also you can compare journals using Journal Analyzer would allow you to compare journals to each other for retention or acquisition. So how you can get to the Journal Analyzer on the Scopus? When you're on Scopus, you click on Sources, and you will see on the right side, actually before you do that, if you click on Sources, you type in, let's say, a journal name. You can look at the journal name by the title, but also you can look them up by subject area, if you will. So if you're going after evaluating different journals by subject, you can click on that title here, change from title to subject area, and you will see a list of journals. So let's say we type a journal name to see what kind of, you want to evaluate that journal. Once you click on the find journal come up here, you click on it, and you will see, think of it like information about that journal or a resume on the journal technically. So you will see different kind of information on it, including the site score. If you are not familiar with site score, it's really similar to the impact factor, but only for 3 years or 2 years. You can see also the Schemago metrics and the SNP metrics for that journal. And you will see on the top here, compare sources. Comparing sources is where you can start stacking different names of journals when you search them, and you can compare them to each other. It tells you, for example, I run here a name for fitness. You can see a list of journals, you select them, and you can see now how they stack to each other by metrics, by citations, and so forth, and publication, and so forth. So these 3 metrics are available for you on every journal, the site score, the Schemago, and the SNP. So you can see that on every source. And that's it, actually. So let me recap. We talked about that the global content is really important in search and discovery. This is why Scopus is really good value for you. It has more global content than any other database out there. Scopus can be used to differentiate your work from others. You want to decide what you want to publish and also who you want to collaborate with, identify and analyze journals, as we just saw now, and it help you as a researcher throughout your career, through better your career through your citation count and evaluate other institutions at the same time. And since I'm talking to professionals who are going out to the field, maybe becoming a professional, even if you're doing work within the institution, I want to be remiss not to mention that Scopus does have an API that's available for you for free. It's part of the subscription. You can use the API to extract data out of the Scopus, and you can crunch it through algorithm. If you're doing analysis or repository, you want to do your algorithm through on the API or Scopus data. You can use that API, or we can have something also custom data where we can take the data in chunks and give it to you. If that's something of an interest to you, we'll be happy to work with you on that. This is the link I have, and for the if you haven't seen it in the chat, this is the link I have for the presentation if you would like to download it. All right. Any questions? Please unmute yourself if you would like to. You don't have to drop it in the search. While I'm actually working on something for Shiva for the finding journals, actually, or defining knowing if the journal predatory or not. I do have something for you. Any questions, Juliana?
No, I do not see any questions so far, but I'm going to add the link to your presentation slides again at the bottom in case folks don't want to or miss the scrolling up. But please feel free to write anything in the chat, or I'm going to unmute myself, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
Yeah, while I'm working on this, give me a minute until I pop that out. Actually, this will be helpful to all of you if you ever want to look at the journals. And I should remember this by heart, to be honest with you, but unfortunately, I don't use it very often. No question, folks? You can't, I mean, really? Well, must be the, it is what, too good or?
Oh, we have a question. We have there's a question on, is there any plan to add more humanities content to Scopus? Thank you, Michelle, for asking that question.
Well, very good question. So actually, Scopus content is based on, I'm going to say 2, maybe 3 factors. One, we get a lot of suggestions from users. So we do have, actually, if you are interested, I do have that link. You can suggest any titles, and the board will evaluate those titles and add them to Scopus if they deem them peer-reviewed. Doesn't matter with the subject. As you saw also, Scopus does cater to just about all the 4 different subject area, but it's still, we can definitely, we have more work to expand on in the social and humanitarian in that subject area. But anyway, if you, one way you can suggest it yourself, the publishers of journals do make actually also make suggestions, so their work be published on Scopus or indexed on Scopus, and the board itself usually go out and select. So I'm not going to tell you that what we have in the pipeline, if it's going to be in or not, but you're welcome to suggest it. If they find it a peer review, they will add it. And then I know a lot of my customers, as a matter of fact, they do. As a matter of fact, just this week, from one of my customers in Washington State, they suggested something, and we added that in. I'm still looking for that link. Apparently, I can't do multitasking, talk and look at the same time.
I really appreciated the slide on the institution. I guess I never really thought about looking at my institution or other institutions and looking at it from that way, and what other journals might, our faculty are publishing in. So that was really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. There's really, I mean, Scopus is not just one thing, to be honest with you. I think of it like a Rubik Cube. You can look at it from different point of views, and you can have different answers, and for whatever purpose. It's not just for one thing. And that's really what I most of the time advocate with the users, that you can use it, as you see now. I mean, who would thought that you can use Scopus for analyzing journals? I mean, the data is in there, the metrics are in there. Why not take advantage of somebody who already went through the vetting and deemed those titles are peer reviewed? So that's one area. So I work also with the federal government, and this is like a while ago, it came to me a question: how can we find people to put on a panel? So like they are experts in certain field. So we want to find people who we can hire, put them on those panels, either within the institution or outside the institutions. And I said, by golly, the author profiles is nothing better than that. It's just like a resume for people without even reaching to those people or contacting these people. One thing I would tell you, kind of really interesting, not many people noticed it, that even the author profile can help you find conflict of interest. So if an individual that you're planning to hire, you know that this person has worked with different institutions, that your institution should not be working with that institution because of the, I don't know, could be secrecy, could be conflict of interest, whatever it makes it, maybe there's some kind of litigation, if you will. That's a great tool for that to find a conflict of interest, why this person should not be on your team or you can be on that panel. So again, using I found it finally. So the author profile is a great tool for that.
Well, thank you. I wanted to take, because we're right at 10:59. Thank you for sharing all of that information and for everyone for joining us today. I'm gonna, before I hand it back over to you, Abdul, I just wanted to highlight that in the chat. I put the link to other Library Skills Week's events, so please feel free to join us. We have more sessions today and throughout the rest of the week. And then we're always looking for feedback, so please feel free if you have some time to quickly fill out that survey. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Abdul. I really, really appreciate your time and energy this morning. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And I will close with this one, actually.
Great.
By all means, by the way, after I finish, if you have any questions or if you would like to chat with me, send me an email and I'll be happy to do one-on-one. I mean, that's what really I do. But I'm not advocating for Elsevier, but every publisher actually has something very similar to this. This is at journalfinder.elsevier.com. As a matter of fact, let me paste it for you in the chat and you can folks use it. And you can go with it, but I'm gonna get you started with this. So yeah, this is so simple, I couldn't even remember journalfinder.elsevier.com. But this is a really good tool. You'll be surprised. As a matter of fact, if I'm gonna just get started here and let you take a look. You can fill any of these information. You can put an excerpt of information from an article, and you can see. Let me get up one piece of information here. But this is a great tool. Again, this is not just for Elsevier. You can find it on any publisher. So I'm going to grab this piece of information. You will get a lot of great tool here, a lot of good information from the journal. It gives you information about any other journals that notice from the abstract that I put in there or the keyword, start detecting what kind of document is that, and it's also give you some statistics and also if you want to publish in. But going back to Shiva's question, if you want to know if the journal predatory or not, if the journal is not in this list for Elsevier, this is just for Elsevier, but also you can find it on other publishers. This is give you a great tool to exclude those predatory publishers, journals. There are other websites that actually list. I remember actually in one of my slides talking about over 10,000 of those journals, predatory journals. There's a website actually does that. Let me pull it out for you, and I'm sure most of you probably know it. But if you're not familiar with that, that's another site where you can see the list of those predatory publishing. But then when you dig into this website on the Journal Finder, you want to look at the website of the journal. So I'll give you this slide and I'll close with that. Look at the website of the journal. Each journal will have a website. It gives you all the information on it, the mission, the policy, and so forth. But look at who are the editors, the information of reviewers, the manager, and look what they've been publishing. Sometimes actually these predatory publishers, they have names of famous people. Even you think they are on that board, but these people have no clue they are actually, their name is showing up on those websites. So there's really, you gotta put like a puzzle, you gotta put it together. But a bit better than all of that is if you look at the famous publisher or known publisher, including academic, like, which one, Oxford Press, for example, from different institutions, those you should not have a problem with, instead of going like backward. If you want to reverse engineering, look at the journal itself, go to their website and start picking up those pieces in the puzzle and start putting it together. Don't be fooled by the famous names on them. They could be actually false names, or could be just those journals put the name of people who are known or great authors, but they have no idea their names is on those websites. I didn't give you all the information that you wanted, but I hope I gave you something to start with. With that being said, I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'll be happy to share this information with you. Juliana, and you can make it